video is about features and strategies that we use in spoken language. It's probably going to be a long one, so feel free to pause, come back to it. You don't have to watch it all in one hit, it's okay. Alright, if you're finding it hard to focus and hard to concentrate on it, then just watch a little bit, take a break, and come back to it later. There will be a note-taking sheet for this on Teams as well as in resources on Compass. But if you want to, you can just take your own notes. You can just do a Cornell sheet or something, that's fine. You don't have to follow that note-taking sheet if you don't want to, because there won't be any exercises on it. Okay? All right. This is what we're focusing on, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of it. All of these are straight from the study design, features of spoken discourse and strategies in spoken discourse. All these are things that we would analyse in something like a conversation or an interview, something like that. Down the bottom you can see the instructions that you get for doing an AC. These are directly from the exam, alright, and these are the same instructions that we give you in SACS as well. The bit that I've highlighted says that you should comment on the stylistic and discourse features of the text. Stylistic just means your language features, so word classes, sentence types, metaphors, anything like that. Discourse features is this. So if you're analysing a spoken text, you need to be writing about these things. If you're analysing a written text, your discourse features would be coherence and cohesion. All right, but for the moment we're looking at spoken text. These are, for the most part, more relevant for informal spoken texts than formal ones. The strategies can be used to analyse a formal spoken text if it's like a dialogue or something, but for the most part you're going to be using these to analyse informal ones. Now, one of the things that I do want you to do with this is answer a series of questions. So in Teams and on Compass, there's a learning task on Compass. There's a document called Features and Strategies of Spoken Discourse. I want you to download it and either print it or type your answers into it. I don't mind which way you go. In this video, you will see little speech bubbles down in the corner of a number of the slides. That speech bubble tells you which questions in that document are relevant to that particular area. All right, so you can, if you want to, do these questions as you go while you're watching this video, or you can just watch the whole thing and do the questions later. Up to you. All right, so first of all, let's look at features of spoken language. Now, when we're talking about features, we're talking about things that we actually say, language that we use, that sort of thing. So our first one is openings and closings. And this is pretty straightforward. It's how we start and finish any kind of spoken text, like a conversation, a phone call, an interview, anything like that. Now, these are often formulaic, and this is a really good word to use when you are writing your analysis. Openings and closings often follow some kind of formula, like a pattern. Okay, so for instance, a series of openings. Hello, how are you? A phone one, I'm calling today because. And a series of closings. And you will recognize some that you use. So think about, with openings and closings, think about how you greet people and how you farewell people. How is that different when you are greeting someone that you know? How do you greet your friends when you see them? Those of you who have jobs, how do you greet people at work? How do you farewell people at work? How do you greet your teachers and farewell your teachers? You will have a series of standard openings and closings to conversations that you use regularly in your everyday speech. And you can see down the bottom on your questions document that you can look at questions 1 to 5 for that. The next one is what's called an adjacency pair. And if something is adjacent, it means it's next to something else. So adjacency pairs are just pairs of what we call utterances that go together. And an utterance is like a line of something that we say. So when you're looking at a transcript, every line is one utterance. An adjacency pair always has these two parts. There is always what's called an initiating utterance. To initiate means to start something. So there's always an initiating utterance and there's always a response. Now there can be a third part. There can be what's called feedback, but there doesn't have to be. All right, but there is always those first two, the initiating utterance and a response. So to give you an example, if we have this very brief conversation between Johnny and Jenny. Johnny says, hello, how are you? Jenny replies, not bad, thanks, how are you? Johnny says, yeah, pretty good, thanks for asking. Jenny says, that's great. Right? Very basic conversation. If we were to analyse that in terms of adjacency pairs, we would say that Johnny's hello, how are you is our initiating utterance. All right, I've colour coded these boxes for you. So that's the initiating utterance. Jenny's not bad, thanks is the response. Then when Jenny says, how are you? Even though it's still on the same line, like it's still the same thing that she's saying, that how are you is a new initiating utterance, starting a new adjacency pair. Okay, so we've had one adjacency pair, hello, how are you, not bad, thanks. We're now starting a second adjacency pair, how are you, followed by the response, pretty good, thanks for asking. And then Jenny's final words that she says, that's great to hear, that's feedback. So that's just adding something extra in response to what Johnny said there, being pretty good, thanks for asking. Like I said, there doesn't always have to be feedback, but there can be. So when you're looking for adjacency pairs, it can be really easy to look for initially a question and answer, like we've got here, hello, how are you, question, not bad, thanks, answer, how are you, question, pretty good, answer, and then see what comes after that, if it's a new question or if it's something in response to the response, if that makes sense. Different times that we would use adjacency pairs or times that we would find adjacency pairs in a text can be things like greetings and farewells, right? Like the conversation we just looked at. Questions and answers, so it's pretty self-explanatory. Giving and receiving of information, so something like, you know, hey, you dropped your wallet, and the person responding with, oh, great, thanks for telling me, something like that. Giving and receiving compliments. When someone says, hey, I love your hair, and you go, oh, thanks, I just had it done. That's an adjacency pair. All right, someone is giving you a compliment and you are either accepting or rejecting it. Complaining and acknowledging. So when someone says, oh, it's freezing in here, and you say, oh, sorry, I'll close the window. All right, they've made a complaint and you have acknowledged in response to that complaint. Or making an offer or a request. So something like, can I borrow a pen? And a response of, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't got a spare one. Okay, anything like that is an adjacency pair, where you have two utterances, one after the other, where one is in response, the second one is in response to the first one. Okay. Next is overlapping. And we remember overlapping from our transcripts by using this symbol of the square brackets. But there are different types and different reasons for overlapping that we can analyse. We don't want to just say that yes, there is overlapping. We want to say why there is overlapping when we're analysing something. So it could be a positive reason of collaborating. Think about when you and your friends are talking. How often does someone finish someone else's sentence? You know what the other person is about to say, And so you anticipate where their sentence is going and you finish it for them, or you finish it with them. This is positive overlapping because it shows that you are listening, it shows you're paying attention, it shows you know that person well enough to know what they're going to say, and it shows that the conversation is what's called cooperative. Okay, so you're working together to make the conversation happen. We can do something called back channeling, or giving a minimal response, and there is going to be more explanation about those further on in this video. Basically what they show is that you are listening, that you're paying attention. But we can also overlap to interrupt, where we try and take over. An overlapping that is an interruption will be shown in your transcript by the first person stopping. All right, if the first person continues to talk, then it's not really interruption. But if they stop talking and the second person takes over, then we would call it an interruption. And the last one is due to timing issues. And that's when you think that the other person has finished talking, but they haven't. And so you start talking, but they're still talking, and you get that awkward, oh, sorry, oh, no, you go, oh, no, you keep going. That sort of conversation. Okay, so they can be reasons, more specific reasons for overlapping that you could write about when you analyse. This one is called interrogative tags, or interrogative, depending on your pronunciation. These can be called tag questions. If you are doing more reading or more research, you might see them referred to as tag questions. Our meta-language is interrogative tags, so when you're writing about them, make sure that's what you use. What they do is they take a declarative and they turn it into an interrogative. And I will show you how that's done. What we can do is we can attach a negative interrogative tag to a positive sentence or a positive declarative. For instance, if I say, you did your homework, that's a positive sentence. All right, I'm assuming that it has been done. I can then attach a tag to that of didn't you? And that is what we call a negative tag, right? Because it's got that negative word didn't. So that negative tag attaches to the positive sentence. We can also do it the other way around, and we can have a positive interrogative tag attaching to a negative sentence. So if I think that you haven't done your homework, I might say, you didn't do your homework, did you? So the original declarative, you didn't do your homework, that's negative. But then the tag that attaches to it is positive. We can also use neutral tags, ones that are neither positive nor negative. And that's something like, you did your homework, right? Words like right or yeah, those sorts of things. They're neither positive nor negative, and so we can attach them to any kind of sentence. The idea of an interrogative tag, the purpose behind it, is so that as a speaker, we want the listener to agree with the declarative. We want the listener to agree with what we're saying. So when I say, you did your homework, didn't you? I'm looking for you to say yes. All right? I want you to agree. But rather than just being very blunt and saying, yeah, you did your homework, I put that tag question at the end of it, that interrogative tag at the end of it. It makes it more polite. Okay? It makes you feel less imposed upon. I'm trying to appeal to your negative face needs. You did your homework, didn't you? Turns it into a question. Gives you an opportunity to respond. All right. Now we come to discourse particles. There's quite a bit of information about these. I'm going to talk for a little while about these. So make sure you've got, if you're doing Cornell notes, make sure you've got quite a bit of space. Discourse particles are words like this. Like, so anyway, well, I mean, basically, kind of, sort of, actually. And think about how often you use words like that, how often you put them into sentences. We all do it. We do it all the time. The thing with discourse particles is that they don't have any real meaning in a sentence. We can remove them and the sentence still makes sense. It still means the same thing. Now that's quite important because some of these words, such as like, or well, or so, can have a grammatical meaning in a sentence. So you have to be really careful when you are analysing something and saying it's a discourse particle. Can it actually be removed from that sentence and the sentence still means the same thing? That's what you got to check for. Things that they do, they can show things like feelings or attitudes of the person speaking, such as whether they are feeling hesitant or uncertain about something, or whether they are showing annoyance. And they say, well, so anyway, and they want to change the topic to something. They can reduce the distance between the listener and the speaker. Discourse particles make a conversation feel more friendly. They make it feel more casual, and they make you feel closer to that person, often because they're not being as definite or as confident about what they're saying. And because it can a discourse particle can reduce the force of a statement. Right? They make something feel softer. They make something feel more relaxed, less powerful, less blunt, anything like that. So for instance, in this example here, where this character is saying, I just feel that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And even if it is broke, just ignore it and maybe it'll be sort of okay. There are a number of discourse particles in there. There are a lot of words that we can remove that won't change grammatically anything in that sentence, but will change how it's presented to a listener. So we can delete all of these words. And then we end up with, I feel that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And even if it is broke, ignore it and it'll be okay. Can you see how that's a much stronger statement than the first one? When you had all those discourse particles in it, it was as though he was feeling less confident about what he was saying, or as though he was he was looking for maybe our approval, or he was hoping that we would agree with him. Whereas like this is just a blunt statement. This is this character saying, I feel this way, and this is the truth. Right? Does that make sense? Why discourse particles are used? I'll give you a few more examples. They can be used to introduce a topic or to change a topic. And so and anyway are the key ones that are used to do that. Think about how often you start a story with so anyway, I was blah blah blah. Interestingly, in this particular image, look at the so that's at the end of it. There are a number of people who finish their sentences with so. I find that really irritating, but a lot of people do it. Consider what that means. What does that so at the end of the sentence do? All right, the so at the start of the sentence is, this is my new topic, this is what I'm talking about now. But what's the so at the end of the sentence doing? Have a think about it. Discourse particles can be used to hedge. And to hedge means to soften something. Right? To hedge means to be less definite, less concrete, less firm about something. So in this one, the kind of in the second half, I'm kind of a big deal to my dog. That's the discourse particle. You can remove that. The rest of the sentence would still mean grammatically the same, but the character is softening the force, is hedging what he is saying. Saying, yeah, I think this is true, but I don't really want to force this opinion on you. Discourse particles can also be used to look for approval or agreement. And in this case, it's words like you know, or you know what I mean, or yeah, those kind of words that we often put at the end of a sentence are discourse particles that are looking for agreement. They're looking for the person to say, yeah, I do know what you mean. I absolutely agree with you. One of the most common discourse particles is like. Think about how often you use the word like in your sentences. I know I do it all the time. How often do you do it? Do you notice? Do you notice when other people do it? Like has a number of different uses. It has a number of different meanings. It's quite interesting to analyse. Pay attention to when you and your friends are talking and why they are using the word like. So for instance, it could be metaphorical. It could be used to say, the thing that I'm about to say is approximate. So for instance, if I was in class and I said, yeah, we'll start to wrap up because there's like 10 minutes left. There might be 9 minutes, there might be 11 minutes, there might be 12 minutes. The like is showing that I'm not being exact here. Right? So that's one use of like. It can be used to hedge. So if I said a sentence like, if I said a sentence such as, yeah, she's like pretty cute, I guess. I'm sort of hedging my bets there. I'm not being flat out definite and saying, yes, she is cute. Because then there's an opportunity for people to disagree with me. But if I say like in that, yeah, she's like pretty cute, I guess. Then if other people do disagree with me, I'm not losing face in any way. It's that the like in there does that. And similarly, it's used to soften a request or to avoid embarrassment. So if I came up to you and said, so do you like, I don't know, want to like go to a movie? The like in that sentence allows you to say no and me to go, oh yeah, that's cool, no worries. Because it's as though I'm not being really, really definite with my request. All right, it's as though I'm saying, it's okay if you don't want to, it's fine, no stress. It was just an idea, just a thought. Okay, so those two are quite similar, the hedging and the avoiding embarrassment. We also use it to introduce stories. So like, I was at this party. Okay, we use it to say, I'm about to tell you something important and you need to pay attention to it. And in a similar way, we use it to emphasize what is coming next. So if I say, oh, he's like totally gorgeous. The like there is used to emphasize precisely how gorgeous this individual is. And possibly the most common one is to quote. We do this all the time. Okay, think of things like, I keep using it, think of things such as, then I was like, yeah, whatever. And then he was like, get out of my face. And then I was like, why? Okay, anything like that. It can be, it's not often used to quote direct speech. So if we're saying, if we're quoting directly what someone said, we're less likely to use like. But if we're just sort of explaining the situation and we're saying that this is kind of what that person said, then we would use like. We also use it when we're saying what we were thinking. You know, so then I was like, oh, piss off, Blakey. Okay, you probably didn't say that to his face, but you might have been thinking it. And we use it to do non-verbal gestures. So if you shrug or, you know, roll your eyes or something, we'd often put a like before that. Okay, on the next slide, I'm going to show you a very short clip from a film called Over the Hedge. It's a cartoon from a few years ago now. You're probably familiar with it. The basic premise of the film is that all of these little animals have to collect food, And so they've been working really, really hard to collect all this food from people, and they've been stealing food. And then one of the animals decides that it's morally wrong to take all this food, and so he returns it. What I want you to look for is the response by the teenage girl character. Even though she's an animal, she's a teenage girl character. I want you to listen to all of the discourse particles that she uses and think about why she is using each one. What does that show about how she's feeling? All right.
Oh, sure.
What the heck happened?
It's gone. The food. Gone.
What? Gone? How's it going?
Ask him.
Vern?
I returned it to its rightful owner.
What?
We worked our tails off, you know? Like a lot. And the food we gathered was totally, you know, and you're all whatever.
Yeah, Vern, what were you thinking? The log was full.
Full of
Okay, so you can see that she used a number of discourse particles, like, you know, totally, whatever. So what you need to consider is, what do these show about her character and how she's feeling in that situation. Alright, moving on from discourse particles. Next couple of slides are about things called non-fluency features. And a non-fluency feature is anything that breaks up the fluent flow of what you are saying. So the first one, which is a fairly obvious one that we can write about a lot, is a pause. And we know the transcription symbol for pauses. 1 dot, sometimes 2, but not often 2. It's usually 1 or 3, depending on the length, within brackets. That shows that there's a pause. If it's a short pause, it's usually spontaneous, and it usually indicates that that person is thinking. So it shows that the text that you're analysing is not scripted. It could be planned to a point, but it's not scripted completely. It's not like someone has memorised a whole lot of lines. Okay, spontaneous conversation always includes pauses, and you need to be able to decide what they're used for. A longer pause can show that something is planned. So if it's 3 dots, you have to be really careful when you're analysing and see if it is showing that that text has been planned. Is that a pause to allow the audience to process? Is that a pause that's there for some kind of emphasis? All right, or is it because that person is just thinking about what they want to say next? Generally, a pause for emphasis, or a pause that allows the audience to process, is in a more formal text, whereas a shorter pause that shows thinking is in a more informal text, generally. When we have a filled pause or a voiced hesitation, that's a word like or ah or okay? Anything that is used instead of silence. Okay, and again, we use them all the time. I've used heaps of them throughout this video. Anything like that, anything that's, there's one right there, anything where there could have been a pause but it was filled with something, shows that the text is spontaneous. It's not scripted, it's unplanned. And our last set of non-fluency features are what are called false starts, repetitions, and repairs. So a false start is when we begin to say something, we realise it's wrong, and we start again. We do that when we mispronounce something, or if we use the wrong word, or if we have started asking a question and we realise it's not the right question, or maybe we've got someone's name wrong, anything like that. So anything where we start a sentence and we only get like 1 or 2 or 3 words in, and then we go back and we fix it, we restart. That's called a false start. Repetition, it can be of anything from a phoneme to a whole utterance, but it's something that is done accidentally. When we were looking at formal texts, we were looking at deliberate repetition. We were looking at repetition that was chosen and used for a purpose. Here, because we're looking at things that are non-fluency features, the repetition here is accidental. And so we have to be really aware of that. It might be like that we've stuttered over a phoneme, for instance, or it could be that we've said a word a couple of times or a phrase a couple of times. So you have to look for whether it is deliberate for emphasis or whether it is accidental. If it's accidental, it's one of these, a non-fluency feature. A repair is similar to a false start, except that a repair is anywhere in a sentence or anywhere in an utterance, whereas a false start is specifically at the beginning. All right, that's the only difference between the two. If you're not sure if something is a false start or a repair, just call it a repair. It'll cover both. And all of these show us that our text is spontaneous. Practice spelling that word spontaneous. It's quite tricky, but you'll want to use it a lot. All right, they were all our features. Like I said, this is a long video. Now we are going to look at the strategies that we use in conversation. Okay, so this is how we conduct ourselves within a conversation more than what we say. The first strategy is topic management. And topic management is all about control. So when we're talking about topic management, we want to know who is controlling the conversation, who is in charge in some way. So we need to think about who might be talking the most, or who might be asking the most questions. Is there someone who has more authority in that conversation? For instance, if it were a conversation between a parent and a child or a teacher and a student, is there someone who has more authority or power? And we want to look at who is choosing the topics for conversation and how are they choosing them? How are they changing the topic? How are they deciding what gets spoken about? That's what we need to consider when we do topic management. We're looking at who is in charge, who is in control. And we want to look at this when we're doing any kind of multi-person spoken text. So a conversation, an interview, something on the radio, something from TV, anything like that. We want to consider who is in control, who is managing the topic. Next is what we call turn taking. There are 3 elements of turn taking that we need to know about, and they all refer to the floor. Now, we don't literally mean the floor as in the thing that you stand on. When we're talking about the floor in this case, we are talking about the conversation. So this first one's called taking the floor, and this is when you want to speak and you might try and take over, you might interrupt, you might say something like, oh, excuse me, to try and get your point in. It can be negative to take over the floor. It's often negative, especially if it's done through interruption. And it can show that a conversation is uncooperative. So if someone is constantly interrupting, if someone is taking over from other people and not letting them finish their part, then you would say that the conversation is not cooperative because that person keeps taking the floor. Next one is called holding the floor, and that is when you start talking and you continue to talk. So it can be done, if you look at a transcript, it can be done by someone's utterances going over a number of lines. It can be done particularly by using a rising intonation to say, yeah, I'm not quite done yet, I've still got a little bit more to say, so don't talk over me, please. If all the participants in the conversation are able to do that, are able to take their turn and hold the floor for a bit, then you would say that it's a cooperative conversation. However, if one person is doing the majority of the talking, then you might argue that it's not a cooperative conversation. The last one is passing the floor. So passing the floor is when you say, well, I've said my bit, it's now someone else's turn to talk. You can ask questions. Interrogatives are a good way of passing the floor. You can use a falling intonation to say, I have said my piece and now I am done. So your voice goes down at the end. Or you can be really direct about it and you can say, oh yeah, so you were saying? Things like that. Passing the floor is a good element of a cooperative conversation. It shows that everybody is equal, everybody is respected, everybody has their turn. All right, this is the last thing. This is something called back-channeling or minimal responses. These are sometimes referred to as listening noises, and I'll show you the difference. Back-channeling and minimal responses are things that show that we are listening to someone else, and we do them all the time in conversation without even thinking about it. It's words like this. So when someone's talking and we're going, uh-huh, oh yeah, true, that sort of thing, that shows that we are listening. Now, if it's something like or uh-huh, we can also describe it as a listening noise because it's not really a word, but you don't have to, that's fine. You can call them either back channeling or minimal responses. It doesn't matter which you use. And all that they are doing is showing the other person that we are engaged in the conversation, we are paying attention to what they are saying, and we are being cooperative. A lot of these are used to show cooperation in a conversation. So if we're using these minimal responses and we're going, yeah, oh yeah, wow, then that shows the other person that we care. Okay. So hopefully you've either been doing those questions as we go, or you are now ready to do them after watching this whole video. There's one other thing that I would like you to do based on all of this, and that's an analytical commentary. We haven't done one of those for informal language yet because we've only just started. So we're going to look at a text that from memory we looked at last year, and it's the conversation between Margaret and Joan about their dogs. It's in your AC booklet, it's text 5. It's also on Compass as a learning task. There's a copy of the text there, so if you didn't bring your AC booklet home, it's fine, don't stress. And I'll put it on Teams as well. In your AC, I want you to use at least 3 features and or strategies from this video. So I want you to have 1 paragraph that is on discourse features and or discourse strategies. It's up to you what you choose. Find things that are relevant. All right. And I want you to have 1 paragraph that's on that. So if it were a written text, this would be your coherence and cohesion paragraph. But because it's a spoken text, it is your discourse features and strategies paragraph. Your other paragraphs you can do whatever you like with, but you need to have somewhere in there purpose, social purpose, register, context. Make sure all of those things are covered somewhere. Your instructions for this are on Compass. You've got a week to do it. Please upload it to Compass when you are done, and make sure you contact me when you have any questions about any of this. Okay, good luck. Bye-bye.